The colony on Elysium 7 was a quiet place, its red skies stretching endlessly over fields of alien grass that shimmered like liquid gold under the twin suns. For years, humans had lived there in relative peace, mining rare minerals and building settlements far from Earth's crowded cities. But today, everything changed. A shadow passed over the horizon, blotting out the light of the stars. At first, people thought it was a storm, a swirling mass of dust or gas. But then they saw it. A ship, impossibly large, descended into orbit above their planet. Its surface gleamed with an iridescent sheen, shifting colors as though alive. Whispers spread quickly through the colony. It wasn't human. "They're here," someone muttered at the market square, where settlers gathered to stare upward. The Caliph. No one needed further explanation. Stories about the Caliph had traveled across the galaxy for decades, tales of their fierce warriors, their psychic powers, and most of all, their women. Rumors claimed the Caliph matriarchs could crush minds with a single glance, bending entire armies to their will. Most humans avoided them altogether, fearing what they didn't understand. But not everyone shared this fear. Dr. Elias Venn stood apart from the crowd, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his worn jacket. He wasn't afraid. If anything, he felt excitement bubbling inside him. As a xenobiologist, Elias had spent years studying alien cultures, fascinated by how different species adapted to survive. To him, the arrival of the Caliph wasn't a threat. It was an opportunity. "Elias, are you insane?" called Mia Torres, another scientist who often worked alongside him. She grabbed his arm, pulling him away from the edge of the square. "You can't seriously want to go near those things." "They're not things, Mia," Elias replied calmly, brushing her hand off. "They're intelligent beings, and we don't know anything about them because no one's willing to take the risk." Mia shook her head, exasperated. "That's exactly why you shouldn't take the risk. Do you even hear yourself? People say their women hunt down intruders for sport." Elias smirked. "Sounds like something teenagers would make up to scare each other. Besides, I've read reports. They value balance, order. If we approach them respectfully, maybe, just maybe, we can learn something." Before Maya could argue further, a loudspeaker crackled to life, announcing that a diplomatic shuttle would depart shortly to meet the Caliph. Volunteers were needed. Without hesitation, Elias stepped forward. "You're crazy," Mia hissed, watching him join the line of nervous volunteers. "Maybe," Elias said with a shrug. "Or maybe I'm the only sane one here." As the shuttle lifted off toward the massive alien vessel, Elias gazed out the window, his heart pounding, not with fear, but with anticipation. Whatever awaited them on that ship, he knew one thing for certain. Humanity couldn't afford to let fear dictate its future. Not anymore. When the shuttle docked and the airlock hissed open, revealing towering figures clad in shimmering armor, Elias felt a thrill run through him. This was history in the making, and he intended to be part of it. The airlock hissed shut behind them, sealing the human delegation inside the Caliph mothership. The chamber they entered was vast and dimly lit, its walls pulsing faintly with an inner glow that seemed almost organic. Strange symbols etched into the surface shifted and rearranged themselves as though alive, casting eerie shadows across the floor. The humans exchanged uneasy glances, their breaths fogging the cold air. Then they arrived. One by one, the Caliph women stepped forward, their towering forms clad in shimmering armor that reflected light like liquid metal. Their movements were deliberate, graceful yet commanding, each step resonating through the chamber like a heartbeat. At their center stood Commander Syra *. She was taller than the others, her presence radiating authority. Her eyes, sharp and piercing, scanned the group of trembling humans, lingering briefly on each face before settling on Elias. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. While the rest of the delegation recoiled under her gaze, Elias found himself unable to look away. There was something about her, not just power, but intelligence, curiosity. For all the stories of terror and destruction, he saw none of that in her expression. Instead, there was calmness, a quiet strength that intrigued him. "Speak," she said finally, her voice deep and melodic, carrying an accent no translator could fully smooth out. "State your purpose here." Ambassador Grayson, the leader of the human team, cleared his throat nervously. He began reciting formalities, words rehearsed for weeks, but his voice trembled, betraying his fear. Syra listened patiently, though her brow furrowed slightly, as if unimpressed by the performance. When Grayson finished, silence fell over the room. No one dared to speak. Then, unexpectedly, Elias stepped forward. "We come seeking understanding," he said, his tone steady despite the weight of dozens of alien stares. "Not conquest, not war. Just knowledge." Syra tilted her head, studying him closely. "Knowledge," she repeated, her tone unreadable. "And what makes you think we would share such things with your kind?" Elias hesitated only briefly. "Because isolation breeds fear. Fear leads to conflict, and conflict benefits no one." A murmur rippled through the Caliph warriors behind Syra, some exchanging glances as though surprised or amused by his boldness. Grayson shot Elias a glare, silently warning him to step back. But Elias ignored it, holding Syra's gaze without flinching. To everyone's astonishment, Syra's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. Without another word, she extended a hand toward him. Confused but determined not to falter, Elias reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device, a crystal containing a recording of Earth's ocean waves crashing against the shore. It was a gift he brought along, hoping to bridge the gap between species. "This is from my world," he explained, placing the crystal gently in her palm. "It's called water. We call this sound peace." For a long moment, Syra simply stared at the tiny object in her hand. Then, slowly, she closed her fingers around it and nodded once. "It is acceptable," she said softly, tucking the crystal away. The tension in the room eased slightly, though many still eyed her warily. As the meeting continued, Elias noticed subtle changes in Syra's demeanor. How she leaned slightly closer when he spoke, how her gaze softened ever so slightly when discussing shared values like balance and coexistence. Others might have missed these details, but Elias didn't. By the end of the session, while most humans remained stiff and guarded, Elias felt a spark of hope ignite within him. Maybe, just maybe, first contact wouldn't end in disaster after all. As the delegation prepared to leave, Syra approached him alone. Leaning down slightly so her voice carried only to him, she said, "You are different from the others, Elias Venn. Do not let them change you." With that cryptic remark, she turned and walked away, leaving Elias standing there, heart racing and mind buzzing with possibilities. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain. Commander Syra had taken notice of him, and that could mean everything. Over the next few weeks, negotiations between humans and the Caliph continued aboard the mothership. Each session was tense, filled with cautious exchanges and mistrust on both sides. While Ambassador Grayson struggled to maintain composure under the weight of Syra's unyielding gaze, Elias found himself growing more comfortable in her presence. He began arriving early to meetings, lingering afterward, and asking questions that others deemed too risky or too personal. At first, the other humans viewed his behavior as reckless. "You're playing with fire," Mia warned him one evening after another long day of talks. "These aren't just aliens, Elias. They're predators. Don't forget what they're capable of." "They're not predators," Elias replied firmly, though he kept his voice low so no one else could overhear. "They're people, just like us. Different, yes, but still people. And if we treat them like monsters, then we become monsters ourselves." Mia sighed, shaking her head. "Fine. Believe what you want, but don't say I didn't warn you when something goes wrong." Despite the warnings, Elias persisted. Slowly but surely, his efforts began to pay off. Syra, who had initially regarded him with guarded curiosity, started opening up during their conversations. She spoke of her culture, their reverence for balance, their belief in mental discipline as a source of strength, and their deep connection to the natural world. In return, Elias shared stories of Earth, describing its oceans, forests, and mountains in vivid detail. One evening, after a particularly grueling negotiation, Syra invited him to walk with her through one of the ship's observation decks. The chamber was breathtaking, its transparent walls offering a panoramic view of the stars outside. For a while, neither of them spoke, simply standing side by side as they gazed out at the endless expanse of space. "You are brave," Syra said finally, breaking the silence. "Most of your kind would never dare to stand where you do now." Elias chuckled softly. "Or maybe I'm just stupid." Syra tilted her head, considering this. "Perhaps, but there is wisdom in stupidity sometimes. It allows you to see things others cannot." Her words made Elias pause. There was a vulnerability in her tone, an honesty, that caught him off guard. For all her power and authority, she seemed lonely. "Why do you trust me?" he asked suddenly, turning to face her. "I'm human. We've done nothing to earn your trust." Syra's expression softened slightly. "Because you listen, because you do not fear me, not truly, and because—" She hesitated, then added quietly, "because I have seen fear destroy enough bridges between worlds. I will not let it build another wall." The admission stunned Elias. Here was a leader, a warrior, who carried burdens far heavier than he'd imagined. Beneath her armor and commanding presence lay doubts and scars, remnants of battles fought both on the field and within herself. As days turned into weeks, their bond deepened. Others noticed, of course. Rumors spread among the human delegation that Elias had grown too close to the enemy, that he might be compromised. Some even accused him of treason, whispering behind his back about how easily he smiled at Syra or how often he sought her company. But Elias didn't care. He knew what he was doing was right, even if it meant risking everything. What he didn't realize, however, was that someone else had taken notice as well. Someone who saw his actions not as an opportunity for peace, but as a threat to their own plans. Late one night, as Elias returned to his quarters, a shadow moved in the corner of his vision. Before he could react, a hand clamped over his mouth, dragging him into the darkness. "You've made a mistake, Doctor," a cold voice hissed in his ear. "A very dangerous one." And for the first time since stepping onto the Caliph ship, Elias felt a chill run down his spine. The sharp sting of a needle pricked Elias's neck before he could fight back, and darkness swallowed him whole. When he woke, his head throbbed, and the sterile white walls of an unfamiliar room greeted him. He was seated in a chair, hands bound tightly behind his back. Across from him stood a man whose face was partially hidden by shadows, but Elias recognized him instantly. "Councilman Rourke," Elias said, his voice hoarse but steady. "I should have guessed it was you." Rourke stepped into the light, revealing cold, calculating eyes that seemed devoid of remorse. As one of the highest-ranking officials on Elysium 7, he had always been vocal about humanity's superiority over alien species. To him, diplomacy with the Caliph was a waste of time, a sentiment he'd made clear during every meeting. "You've caused quite a problem for us, Dr. Venn," Rourke said, pacing slowly in front of him. "Getting cozy with the enemy. Sharing secrets. Do you think we didn't notice?" "I haven't shared anything." Elias shot back, glaring at him. "Everything I've done has been to build trust, not destroy it." "Trust?" Rourke scoffed, stopping abruptly to lean closer. "They're aliens, Elias. Not equals. They don't deserve our trust, or our respect. And yet here you are, parading around like some kind of hero while risking everything we've worked for." Elias clenched his jaw. "What exactly are you working for, Rourke? Peace, or something else?" For a moment, Rourke didn't answer. Instead, he straightened up and turned away, walking toward a console on the far wall. With a few taps, holographic images flickered to life. Blueprints of advanced technology unlike anything Elias had ever seen. Sleek designs, intricate circuits, and glowing cores pulsed ominously in the air. "This is why we're here," Rourke said, gesturing to the display. The Caliph possessed technology capable of reshaping reality itself. Imagine what humanity could achieve with power like that. Weapons, energy sources, even immortality. It's all within reach if we play our cards right. Elias's stomach churned as realization dawned. "You want to steal their tech." "Not steal," Rourke corrected, his lips curling into a sinister smile. "Repurpose. For the greater good of humanity." "And what happens when they find out?" Elias demanded, his voice rising despite himself. "Do you really think they'll just let us take it? This isn't cooperation. It's theft. And it'll start a war." "They won't find out," Rourke replied calmly, turning back to face him. "Because you're going to help me make sure of that." Before Elias could respond, the door slid open, and 2 armed guards entered, dragging someone else into the room. It was Lyran Asterisk, the young Caliph warrior who had occasionally accompanied Syra during negotiations. Her armor was scuffed, her usually proud posture now slumped under restraint. She glared at Rourke with pure hatred burning in her eyes. "What have you done to her?" Elias shouted, straining against his bonds. "Nothing, yet," Rourke answered casually. "But she wandered too close to restricted areas. Curiosity can be dangerous, especially for aliens." Elias felt fury bubbling inside him, but he forced himself to stay calm. Lyran's presence here meant one thing. Syra would know something was wrong soon enough. If he could stall long enough, maybe, just maybe, he could turn the tables. "You're making a mistake," Elias said, locking eyes with Rourke. "The Caliph aren't just powerful, they're intelligent. Smarter than you give them credit for. And if you hurt her—" "Oh, don't worry," Rourke interrupted, smirking. "She's safe, for now. But whether she stays that way depends entirely on you." As the guards dragged Lyran out of the room, leaving Elias alone once more, his mind raced. He knew Rourke wouldn't hesitate to use violence to get what he wanted. But there was one weapon Elias still had, an ally he hadn't fully tapped into yet. Syra. If anyone could stop this madness, it was her. The question was, how far was Rourke willing to go before she intervened? And more importantly, how much damage would be done by then? Elias closed his eyes, focusing on the sound of his breathing. Fear wouldn't save him, or Lyran. Only action would. And for the first time since stepping onto the Caliph's ship, Elias realized just how much was truly at stake. Elias sat in silence, his mind racing as he pieced together Rourke's plan. The councilman wasn't acting alone. This betrayal ran deeper than one man's greed. There were others involved, people within the human delegation who had quietly supported Rourke's ambitions. They'd been sabotaging negotiations from the start, spreading lies about Elias's supposed collaboration with the Caliph to justify their own actions. But Elias knew one thing for certain. Time was running out. If Syra discovered Lyran missing, or worse, harmed, it would ignite a chain reaction neither species could contain. War would follow, and countless lives would be lost. He had to act quickly. The door creaked open again, snapping him out of his thoughts. A guard entered, carrying a tray of food and water. Though his hands were still bound, Elias managed to kick the tray out of the guard's grasp, sending it clattering to the floor. The distraction worked. The guard cursed under his breath and bent down to pick it up. In that split second, Elias lunged forward, using the chair he was tied to as leverage to knock the guard off balance. It wasn't elegant, but it got the job done. The guard stumbled backward, hitting his head against the wall and collapsing unconscious. Elias wasted no time freeing himself, using the guard's utility knife to cut through the ropes binding his wrists. Once free, He rummaged through the guard's pockets, finding a keycard and a small communicator. He hesitated only briefly before pressing the device to his ear. "Syra," he whispered urgently. "If you're listening, I need your help." Static crackled on the other end for a moment before her voice came through, sharp and commanding. Elias Fen. "Explain yourself." "They've taken Liren," Elias said quickly, keeping his voice low. "Councilman Rourke, he's planning to steal your technology. You have to stop him." There was a pause, heavy with tension. Then, softly, she replied, "Where are you?" Elias gave her the location of the makeshift prison where he was being held. Before signing off, Syra added, "Do not move. My warriors will come for you." True to her word, it didn't take long. Within minutes, the sound of armored footsteps echoed down the corridor outside. The door burst open, revealing two Caliph women clad in shimmering battle gear. Their weapons gleamed ominously in the dim light, but they lowered them upon seeing Elias. "Commander Sadara sent us," one of them said curtly. "Come with us if you want to live." Elias didn't argue. He followed them through winding corridors until they reached a secure chamber deep within the ship. Inside, Syra awaited him, her expression unreadable. Liren stood beside her, battered but alive, her fiery gaze locked onto Elias. "You risked much to save me," she said, her tone softer than usual. "Why?" "Because it's the right thing to do," Elias replied simply. Sadara stepped closer, studying him intently. "You have proven yourself trustworthy, Elias Fen. But trust is fragile. What happens next depends on you, and your willingness to fight alongside us." "What do you mean?" Elias asked cautiously. Syra gestured to a holographic display showing Elysium 7 below. "Rourke plans to launch an attack on our fleet tonight. If we do not act now, war will begin. A war neither of our peoples can afford." Elias felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you need me to do?" Her lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "You know humanity better than we do. Help us expose Rourke's treachery and prevent this conflict before it begins." For the first time since his capture, Elias felt hope stir within him. It wouldn't be easy, but with Syra and her warriors by his side, he believed they might stand a chance. Together, they devised a plan to infiltrate the human colony and gather evidence of Rourke's conspiracy. As they prepared to depart, Liren placed a hand on Elias's shoulder. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Not all humans are cowards." Elias nodded, determination burning in his chest. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain. The fate of both species rested on what happened next, and failure wasn't an option. The journey back to the Caliph mothership was tense, every moment fraught with urgency. Elias, Syra, and Liren moved swiftly through Elysium 7's underground tunnels, avoiding patrols while gathering evidence of Rourke's conspiracy. They hacked into secure systems, copied data logs, and recorded incriminating transmissions, all proof that Rourke and his faction had been planning an attack on the Caliph fleet. But their mission wasn't without peril. As they neared the final checkpoint leading to the surface, alarms blared overhead, red lights flashing along the walls. Someone had discovered their intrusion. "They know we're here," Liren hissed, gripping her weapon tightly. "Stay close," Syra commanded, her voice calm but firm. "We cannot afford to fail now." Elias nodded, clutching a stolen datapad filled with damning evidence. His heart pounded as the sound of boots echoed down the corridor behind them. Guards were closing in fast. Syra raised a hand, signaling for silence. With a swift motion, she activated a device on her wrist, projecting a shimmering barrier across the hallway. The guards slammed into it moments later, their weapons useless against the psychic shield. "Move," Syra barked, ushering Elias and Liren forward. They sprinted toward the exit, emerging into the open air just as a shuttle descended from above. It wasn't human. It was Caliph. Two warriors leaped out, covering their retreat as they boarded. The shuttle lifted off seconds before a hail of gunfire erupted from below. Back aboard the mothership, Elias felt a mix of relief and dread. The evidence was safe, but the real challenge lay ahead, presenting it to the Caliph Council. This wasn't just about exposing Rourke. It was about proving humanity's worthiness of trust. Syra led them to the heart of the ship, a massive chamber illuminated by glowing crystals embedded in the walls. The air hummed with energy, and at its center stood the council, a circle of Caliph women radiating power and authority. Their gazes locked onto Elias as he entered, some curious, others hostile. "This human has something to say," Syra announced, stepping aside to let Elias speak. Taking a deep breath, Elias stepped forward, holding up the datapad. "I come not as an enemy, but as someone who believes peace is possible. What I hold here is proof of betrayal, not by all humans, but by a few who seek war for their own gain. Councilman Rourke plans to attack your fleet tonight, using stolen technology to justify further aggression." Murmurs rippled through the chamber, skepticism etched on many faces. One elder counselor rose, her voice cutting through the tension. "Why should we believe you? You are human. Your kind fears what it does not understand, and destroys what it cannot control." Elias met her gaze without flinching. "Because I'm asking you to judge us not by our worst, but by our best. Not every human is like Rourke. Some of us want to learn, to grow, to coexist. But if you strike first, if you retaliate without knowing the truth, you'll prove them right. You'll show them that fear and violence are the only languages we understand." Silence fell over the chamber. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Syra stepped forward, placing a hand on Elias's shoulder. "He speaks the truth," she said firmly. "I have seen it in his actions. If we act rashly, we become no better than those we despise." The council deliberated quietly, their voices low but intense. Finally, the elder counselor turned back to Elias. "Very well. We will hear your plea. But know this: if you lie, there will be consequences." Elias nodded, feeling the weight of their scrutiny. "Understood." As the council prepared to review the evidence, Syra pulled him aside. "This is your chance, Elias Venn. Prove to them, and to yourself, that humanity deserves another path." He looked at her, resolve hardening in his chest. Whatever happened next, he would face it head-on. Failure wasn't an option, not when so much hung in the balance. And as the council began examining the data, Elias realized this was more than just a trial for humanity. It was a test of whether two vastly different species could find common ground, or destroy each other trying. The council chamber grew eerily quiet as the Caliph elders reviewed the evidence Elias had provided. Holographic displays flickered to life around them, projecting stolen blueprints of Caliph technology, intercepted communications between Rourke and his allies, and surveillance footage of their preparations for war. Each piece of data painted a damning picture of betrayal, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. One elder counselor leaned forward, her sharp eyes piercing through the dim light. "This proves intent," she said, her voice cold and measured. "But it does not prove loyalty. How can we trust that this human speaks for all of his kind?" Syra stepped forward, her presence commanding attention. "Trust is not given, it is earned. And Elias Venn has earned mine." Her words carried weight, but skepticism lingered in the room. Another counselor rose, her tone skeptical. "You would stake your honor on this one human. Commander Syra, you have always valued caution above emotion. Have you let sentiment cloud your judgment?" Before Syra could respond, Elias stepped forward, his voice steady despite the knot of fear tightening in his chest. "I'm not asking you to trust me blindly, or even to trust humanity as a whole. I'm asking you to see us for who we are. Flawed, yes, but capable of change. If you strike at us now, you'll only validate those among us who believe violence is inevitable. But if you give us a chance, if you show us another way, then maybe, just maybe, we can rise to meet your expectations." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, the elder counselor nodded. "We will consider your plea," she said finally. "But there is one final test, a trial by truth." Elias frowned. "What do you mean?" Syra turned to him, her expression grim. "It is a psychic examination. Our sacred technology will delve into your mind, revealing your thoughts, memories, and intentions. There can be no deception. You will be laid bare before us." Elias felt a chill run down his spine. He'd heard stories about the Calith's psychic abilities, their power to shatter minds or uncover secrets buried deep within. To undergo such a trial was dangerous, not just physically, but emotionally. Yet he knew there was no other choice. "I'll do it," he said firmly. "If it means proving my sincerity, then I'll face whatever comes." Syra placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch surprisingly gentle. "Be warned, Elias. This process will test more than your courage. It will expose everything, the good, the bad, and the parts of yourself you may wish to hide." He nodded, swallowing hard. "Then let's get it over with." They led him to a smaller chamber, its walls lined with glowing crystals that pulsed rhythmically like a heartbeat. At its center stood a pedestal, atop which rested an intricate device, resembling a crown made of shimmering threads of light. Syra guided him to it, her gaze unwavering. "Relax," she instructed softly. "Let go of your fears. Resistance will only make it harder." As the device was placed upon his head, Elias closed his eyes, focusing on his breathing. A surge of energy coursed through him, and suddenly he was no longer in the chamber. Memories flooded his mind. His childhood fascination with aliens, his struggles against prejudice in academia, his determination to build bridges instead of walls. Painful moments surfaced too. Failures, doubts, moments when he questioned whether any of this mattered. Through it all, the council watched silently, their expressions unreadable. When the trial ended, Elias collapsed to his knees, trembling but alive. "You have faced yourself," the elder counselor declared solemnly. "And in doing so, you have proven your worth." Syra extended a hand, helping him to his feet. Her eyes gleamed with pride. "And something else. Hope. The path ahead will not be easy," she said quietly. "But together, we may yet forge a future worth fighting for." For the first time since this ordeal began, Elias allowed himself to believe that peace might actually be possible.